Imagine that you and a friend are pulling on a third friend, each of you pulling with 450 newtons, and your friend is unbothered. He's providing no resistance. What will happen in this case? Obviously, you just pull him to the right. This can be stated mathematically by finding the resultant. The resultant is simply 450 newtons plus another 450 newtons. Since they're both to the right, the resultant is 900 newtons to the right. Let's look at another example here. We have one group on the right pulling with 450 newtons to the right. They are now overpowered by the group on the left, which is pulling with 500 newtons to the left. They are OP for the group on the right. The resultant is easy to see. The group overall will move to the left. How can this be expressed mathematically? Well, our resultant will be the sum of 450 newtons plus negative 500 newtons. Where does that negative come from, you might ask? Well, with forces, you need to pick a positive direction. Here, I picked, without you knowing, the right to be the positive direction. And if the right is positive, then the left, which is the opposite direction, has to be negative. So the resultant is 450 newtons minus 500 newtons, which gives us a resultant of negative 50 newtons to the right. This could also be stated a second way. It is also equivalent to 50 newtons simply to the left. Please note that both of those statements are saying the same thing. Now, perpendicular vectors. What if you are moving 30 kilometers to the west and you then move 40 kilometers south? What is the resultant of those two vectors? To determine the magnitude of the resultant, we have to use Pythagoras' theorem. The formula for Pythagoras' theorem states c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. In this case, r is our value of c, which is the resultant, and then a and b are 40 and 30 respectively. If we square those, we'll get 1600 plus 900, and that gives us 2500. So the resultant squared is 2500, which means that the resultant will be the square root of 2500, and that gives us 50 kilometers. So if you move 30 kilometers west and 40 kilometers south, overall from your starting point, you have only moved 50 kilometers in a straight line. That is the magnitude. Now let us determine the direction. Now for the direction. We know that opposite to the angle theta is 40 and adjacent to the angle theta is 30. So if we have opposite and adjacent, then that will be tangent. Substituting our values, we get that the tangent of theta is 40 kilometers divided by 30 kilometers. Kilometers cancel, and we can divide by 10 on the numerator and the denominator, and we're left with the tangent of theta is 4/3. The angle theta will then be the inverse tangent of 4/3, which to the nearest whole number is 53 degrees. The resultant is therefore 50 kilometers at an angle of 53 degrees from the 30 kilometer vector. Note, this can be also stated as 50 kilometers at an angle of 37 degrees from the 40 kilometer vector. How is that possible? Well, instead of finding that angle theta which is near the 30 degrees, we could have found the angle theta which is near the 40 kilometers. And if we do so, you'll get 37 degrees. And that is relative to the 40 kilometer vector. In summary, the resultant of parallel and anti-parallel vectors is the sum and difference of the vectors respectively. And the resultant of perpendicular vectors is determined using Pythagoras' theorem and trig ratios.